Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something that's driving you crazy. He acts distant. He doesn't message as much. He pulls back when things start getting deep, and part of you wants to believe he doesn't care, but something about his energy, the way he looks at you, the way he lingers, tells a different story. You know what's confusing? When someone is hooked on you but doesn't know how to handle it, because we often assume that love or attraction will always show up through effort, consistency, and romance. But real emotions, real feelings, they terrify some people. So here's what I want you to take away today. Just because he's acting distant doesn't mean you're not in his head. A man acting distant doesn't always mean he's lost interest. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in modern dating, especially when it comes to emotionally complex or avoidant men. When a man starts feeling something real, deeper than attraction or chemistry, it can trigger a reaction that looks like withdrawal. He might pull back, go quiet, or take longer to respond. Not because he doesn't care, but because those feelings trigger something inside him he hasn't faced. For many men, deep emotions bring up fear of vulnerability, of being hurt, of not being enough. And when those fears get activated, the instinct isn't to run toward the fire, it's to pull back and protect. So while you're left wondering what went wrong, he's simply trying to manage something that feels overwhelming. When he's hooked but conflicted, his behavior becomes inconsistent. He might mirror your energy, warm when you're warm, distant when you're distant. This isn't manipulation, it's emotional confusion. He's fighting a battle between his desire to connect and his fear of losing control. The hot moments are real. When he's open, flirty, and present, his guard is down. The cold moments come when he starts to feel too much. Even when he pulls back, he doesn't disappear. He stays in your orbit, watching your stories, liking your old posts, checking in with a "hey, stranger." This isn't random. It's the behavior of someone who's emotionally torn. He wants you close enough to feel safe, but not so close that he loses control. That's the hallmark of emotional conflict, managing closeness while avoiding vulnerability. You'll notice his mood changes depending on your presence. One moment he's warm and charming, the next he's guarded and distracted. This isn't because his feelings vanished, it's because they got real. When emotions deepen, his fears awaken. His moods reflect that tug of war between wanting you and fearing what that means. He might not plan to reach out, but he finds reasons to: a random text, a comment on something small. It's like his emotions leak through the cracks of his avoidance. Even when he's quiet, you're on his mind. That's why he keeps reappearing just when you start to pull away. One of the clearest signs that someone is still emotionally invested in you is when they can't stop watching you. Even if they don't talk to you anymore. Maybe he doesn't send messages, maybe days, even weeks go by without him reaching out. But there he is, always one of the first people to view your stories, liking an old post, or quietly keeping up with your life from the shadows. It's a strange kind of presence. One that doesn't make a sound, but is still deeply felt. You can't help but wonder if he's still paying attention, if he's still showing up in these small digital ways. What does that mean? Does it mean he still cares? Does it mean he regrets pulling back? Or is he just watching to see if you've moved on? When someone watches you from a distance, it's not always about love in its purest form. Sometimes it's about control. Watching allows him to feel connected to you without being vulnerable. It gives him a sense of emotional access without the risk that comes with real intimacy. It's safer that way. He doesn't have to open up, explain himself, or face the discomfort of his own feelings. He can just observe. It's the emotional equivalent of standing behind a glass wall. He can see everything, but he doesn't have to participate. This kind of behavior is what many people now call orbiting. It's when someone doesn't fully leave your life, but they don't fully stay either. They hover, they linger. They keep a door slightly open, just enough to remind you that they're still there, but not enough to truly walk through it. And the truth is, this kind of energy can be incredibly confusing to the person on the receiving end. You start questioning what it means. You start wondering if those little actions are like a view, a subtle comment, are signs of interest, signs of hope, or just emotional crumbs. But the reality is this attention and intention are not the same thing. Someone can pay attention to you because they're curious, nostalgic, or even a little possessive, but that doesn't mean they have the intention to show up, to communicate, or to build something real. Attention is easy, it costs nothing. Intention requires effort, courage, and emotional presence. And for someone who is emotionally conflicted, attention becomes the substitute for intention. It's the way they stay connected without having to do the hard work of connection. When a man keeps watching you like this, it often means he hasn't made peace with the loss of you. He might have pulled away, but emotionally, he hasn't let go. You still occupy space in his mind. He wonders what you're doing, who you're with, how you're feeling. But instead of confronting those questions with honesty, he observes from a distance. Watching you gives him temporary relief from the uncertainty. It's his way of maintaining emotional control in a situation that feels uncertain or unfinished. It's not always malicious or manipulative. Often it's unconscious. He may not even realize why he's doing it. It's just that seeing you gives him a sense of familiarity, of connection, of safety. Even if he's not ready to face what he feels, he doesn't want to lose the emotional thread completely. It's like someone standing in the doorway, not ready to walk back in, but not ready to shut the door either. The painful part is that this behavior can keep you emotionally stuck, because when someone keeps watching you, it sends a mixed signal. You start to think, if he didn't care, why would he still be around? You hold on to that small evidence of interest, even when his actions show no real movement forward. It becomes a cycle of hope and disappointment. You start reading into every view, every like, every small gesture, trying to decode what it means, when in reality, what it means is that he's not ready to let go, but he's also not ready to step up. This kind of attention is like emotional static. It's there, but it doesn't move anything forward. It creates noise that keeps you from hearing your own clarity. Because the truth is, someone who wants to be in your life will show you. They won't just watch you, they'll reach for you. They won't just observe, they'll participate. The difference between someone who watches and someone who chooses you is the difference between curiosity and commitment. You see, watching someone from a distance allows a person to maintain an illusion of connection without the responsibility that real connection demands. He can still feel like he's part of your world, but he doesn't have to deal with the vulnerability that comes with being truly seen. It's emotional self-protection disguised as casual interest. And sometimes it's not even about you. It's about what you represent. You represent the part of him that felt something, that cared, that was alive in a way he might not have felt in a long time. Watching you is a way of revisiting that feeling without having to face the risk of being hurt again. But as comforting as that might be for him, it can be damaging for you. Because every time he appears in your notifications or views your story, it stirs something inside you. It reopens emotional doors you were trying to close. It keeps you emotionally invested in someone who isn't actively showing up. That's why it's important to remember that attention, no matter how consistent, is not proof of commitment. It's not even proof of care. It's often proof of emotional confusion. And here's the thing: real connection requires clarity. It requires mutual vulnerability, effort, and emotional availability. Someone who truly values you will not be content to stay on the sidelines of your life. They'll want to be in it. They'll want to talk, to understand, to share, to grow. Watching is passive. Loving is active. So when you notice that someone keeps watching you but never reaches out, see it for what it is: a reflection of their own emotional limitations, not a reflection of your worth. You're not someone to be observed. You're someone to be experienced, to be chosen, to be valued. And the most powerful thing you can do in this situation is to stop performing for their attention. Stop posting or responding in ways that you hope will trigger a reaction. Stop seeking proof that they still care through small gestures, and shift your energy back to yourself. Because when you stop caring about who's watching, you take back your power. People who are meant to be in your life will not have to watch from a distance. They'll step forward with intention. They'll speak clearly, act consistently, and show you through their behavior that they value your presence. Until that happens, understand that some people will only have the courage to watch you from afar, and that's okay. Let them, because the right person won't just watch your story, they'll want to write the next chapter with you. When you get close to his emotions, something shifts in him. At first, he might seem open, connected, even drawn to the vulnerability that's starting to grow between you. But the moment things begin to feel real, the moment your presence starts touching the deeper layers of his heart, he begins to pull away. You can feel the distance immediately. The energy changes, the warmth fades, and suddenly, the man who once seemed so emotionally available starts retreating into silence or distraction. It's confusing, even painful, because your instinct tells you that something meaningful was there. You felt it. You saw it in his eyes, in the way he relaxed around you, in the way his guard momentarily dropped. And yet, here he is, pulling back as if closeness is something dangerous. It's easy to take that shift personally. You might think, Did I say too much? Did I come on too strong? Am I too emotional? But the truth is, it's rarely about you. It's about him, about the fears, beliefs, and emotional patterns that live beneath his surface. When you get close to a man's emotions, especially one who isn't used to being emotionally seen, it can feel like exposure. To you, vulnerability is connection. To him, vulnerability might feel like risk, weakness, or loss of control. His mind starts sending alarm signals that say, be careful, don't get hurt, don't lose control. This is why deep feelings often create deep fear. The more he starts to care, the more he realizes he has something to lose. And for a man who hasn't yet made peace with his own emotions, that awareness can be overwhelming. Love, affection, and emotional intimacy don't always feel comforting to someone who's used to protecting himself. They can actually feel threatening. Imagine someone who's spent years building walls around their heart to stay safe. Now, suddenly you show up and without even trying, you start climbing those walls. You see him in ways others don't. You ask questions that reach past his surface. You give him the feeling of being understood, something he might crave but also fear deeply. So, what does he do? He retreats. Not because he doesn't care, but because caring triggers the very emotions he spent so long avoiding. The pullback isn't rejection. It's a defense mechanism. It's his way of saying, this is too much, too soon, even if he doesn't use those words. Some men grew up learning that emotions make you weak, that expressing pain or fear is something to be ashamed of. Others have been hurt before and built emotional armor as a form of survival. When these men start to feel real connection, it challenges their internal narrative. It brings back old wounds, old insecurities, and sometimes even the fear of being hurt again. That's why when things start getting emotionally intense, he might become distant, irritable, or defensive. He might start arguments over small things or seem cold and uninterested. These behaviors are often distractions, ways to shift the focus away from the emotional closeness he isn't ready to handle. It's not that he doesn't feel, it's that he feels too much and doesn't know what to do with it. The emotional flood inside him is unfamiliar, and instead of letting it flow, he shuts it down. This dynamic is incredibly common with emotionally avoidant people. To them, emotions aren't just feelings, they're threats to their sense of stability. When love becomes too real, they panic. They fear losing themselves, fear being hurt, fear not being enough, or fear letting someone down. And so instead of embracing the feeling, they retreat into distance, not realizing that in protecting themselves, they're also sabotaging the very connection they crave. For the person on the other side of this, for you, it can feel heartbreaking. You offer warmth and understanding, but he meets it with resistance. You open up and he closes down. It feels like a rejection, but it's really self-protection. He's not rejecting you as a person. He's rejecting the emotional exposure that being close to you creates inside him. His nervous system is saying, this feels dangerous. Even though it's the very intimacy he wants deep down, it's a paradox that confuses both people. You feel punished for bringing out something genuine in him, while he feels unsafe in the very closeness that could heal him. And unless he learns to face those emotions, to regulate them, and to trust vulnerability, the cycle repeats. He opens up just enough to feel something, then pulls back when it gets too intense. Each time, he convinces himself it's better to stay guarded. Understanding this pattern doesn't make it less painful, but it helps you stop internalizing it. His pulling away isn't proof that you're too emotional or too demanding. It's evidence that he's still wrestling with himself. He's overwhelmed by what he feels because he hasn't learned how to handle it. Think of it like emotional claustrophobia. When intimacy starts closing in, his instinct is to escape, to get air, to feel safe again. That escape might look like silence, distance, distraction, or even pushing you away. But underneath that behavior is fear, not indifference. Sometimes the fear is rooted in past heartbreaks. Maybe he once opened up to someone and got hurt. Maybe he learned that love can turn into pain. So now whenever he feels something real, his brain associates it with danger. Other times, the fear comes from childhood, growing up in an environment where emotions weren't safe, where love felt conditional, or where vulnerability led to disappointment. So now, as an adult, when he feels something genuine, his body reacts as though he's under threat. What's tragic is that this fear doesn't cancel out his feelings, it buries them. He still cares. He still feels drawn to you. He still thinks about you when you're not there. But he can't stay emotionally present because he hasn't built the inner safety to do so. He resists not because he doesn't want love, but because he doesn't yet trust it. When you understand that, you start seeing his withdrawal differently. Instead of chasing after him or trying to prove your worth, you can meet the situation with compassion, not for him to the point of self-sacrifice, but for yourself, knowing it's not about your inadequacy, it's about his capacity. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that they might not be ready to receive it. And sometimes the best thing you can do is give him the space to face his own fears while you stay anchored in your own peace. Because when you stop trying to pull him closer and instead hold your ground with calm confidence, it creates contrast. He feels the difference between the chaos of his fear and the stability of your energy. That contrast can either push him to face what's inside or confirm that he's not ready. Either way, you stay in your power. Remember, love that's built on fear will always struggle to breathe. Real connection requires emotional safety on both sides. If he pulls away when you get close, it's not your job to chase him back. It's his work to understand why closeness feels unsafe and to decide whether he wants to heal that pattern. Until then, his resistance is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of his unhealed emotions. So when you feel him pull away, take a deep breath. Don't panic. Don't blame yourself. What's happening isn't rejection, it's fear. And the only thing stronger than fear is self-awareness, both his and yours. If he chooses to face it, love can grow. If he doesn't, you'll still have learned the most powerful lesson of all, that someone's inability to receive love has nothing to do with your ability to give it. When someone still thinks about you but isn't ready to face what they feel, they often find quiet, indirect ways to keep you present in their world. He may not call or message you anymore, but somehow your name keeps finding its way into conversations. Maybe a mutual friend mentions that he asked how you're doing. Maybe someone tells you he brought you up out of nowhere. A story, a memory, a casual reference that seems harmless on the surface. But deep down, you know it isn't random. When a man mentions you when he doesn't have to, it's not an accident. It's emotion trying to find a voice. People reveal more through what they say indirectly than what they admit directly. When he talks about you to others, even in passing, it shows you still occupy space in his mind. He's curious. He's still emotionally connected, even if he pretends otherwise. But instead of reaching out to you, he uses others as emotional messengers, bridges that allow him to stay close while protecting himself from vulnerability. It's safer that way. He doesn't have to risk rejection or confrontation, but he still gets the small comfort of your presence, even if it's just through conversation. You might hear from a friend that he asked about you, how you've been, what you're doing. If you're seeing someone new, he'll frame it casually as if it's just small talk. But people don't casually ask about someone they've completely detached from. He might even joke about you, bringing you up in a teasing or offhand way to disguise genuine curiosity. It's his way of testing the emotional waters, seeing if your name still carries warmth, if your story is still open, if you still care. Every mention is a breadcrumb, a small attempt to stay tethered to you without admitting he still feels something. That's the psychology behind emotional distance. For many men, vulnerability is something they struggle to express directly. They're taught to hide their emotions, to keep their hearts guarded, to avoid looking weak. So, when feelings resurface, when your memory triggers something deep in him, instead of reaching out to you openly, he finds subtle detours. He lets your name slip into conversation because it gives him relief. Talking about you indirectly soothes the ache of missing you without the risk of exposure. It allows him to feel connected without having to confess that connection. This is what emotional avoidance looks like in real time. It's not coldness, it's fear. Fear of rejection, fear of confrontation, fear of being vulnerable again. If you look closer, his behavior tells a story. He's still emotionally invested, but he doesn't trust himself enough to face it. By mentioning you to others, he gets to hold on to a piece of you. It's almost like emotional eavesdropping. He gets updates, context, and reassurance through other people's words. Maybe he wants to know you're okay. Maybe he hopes you're not completely over him. Maybe he's just trying to keep a thread of connection alive because the silence between you feels too final. The irony is that this indirect approach often reveals more than words ever could. Because someone who's truly over you doesn't bring you up. They don't need to. When a chapter is closed, it stays closed. You become just another part of their past, not a name that lingers on their tongue or a thought that crosses their mind at random. The fact that he still talks about you, even subtly, means there's still emotional energy tied to your name. It means your story still lives inside him, unfinished in some way. But while it can be flattering or confusing to hear that he still brings you up, it's important to understand what it really means and what it doesn't. It means he still feels something, yes, But it doesn't necessarily mean he's ready to do anything about it. Mentioning you is easy. Reaching out takes courage. Many people linger in that middle space, still emotionally attached but too afraid to act on it. So they stay stuck in a loop of curiosity and silence, unable to move forward but unwilling to fully let go. When you hear that he's still talking about you, your heart might stir. You might feel hope that maybe he's thinking of coming back, that maybe he misses you enough to finally say something. But you have to look beyond the words. If his actions don't follow, it's just emotional residue. A sign that you left an impact, not a promise of reconciliation. Because if someone truly wants to be in your life, they won't settle for talking about you to others. They'll talk to you. They'll step out from behind their fear and take real action. It's also worth recognizing that sometimes mentioning you serves a different emotional purpose for him. It can be a way of soothing guilt, of reminding himself that he still cares, even if he didn't do right by you. Or it can be a way of keeping his ego intact, reassuring himself that the connection isn't fully gone. When people are emotionally conflicted, they look for ways to manage that discomfort without changing their behavior. Talking about you becomes a small way to stay emotionally balanced, to feel close to something he misses but can't handle directly. You might also notice that the way he brings you up depends on his emotional state. If he's still tender or nostalgic, your name might come with softness, a small smile, a thoughtful memory. If he's still conflicted or defensive, he might mention you in a dismissive way, as if he's trying to downplay what you meant. But both are reactions that come from the same place: emotion. Indifference doesn't talk about you at all. The human heart rarely moves on cleanly. Even after time passes, even after silence stretches long, remnants of connection remain. Sometimes they show up in dreams, in songs, in random thoughts. Sometimes they show up in words, your name mentioned quietly in a conversation that drifts toward memory. And while that might not mean reconciliation, it's proof that you mattered. You left an imprint deep enough that even avoidance can't erase it. Still, you can't build your peace on indirect signs, because emotional breadcrumbs, while meaningful, aren't enough to sustain connection. They're fragments of something that once was, not the foundation of something new. You deserve more than to be someone's quiet curiosity. You deserve to be chosen openly, spoken to directly, and valued without hesitation. So when you hear that he's still bringing you up, take it as what it is: evidence that you left a mark on someone's soul. But don't confuse remembrance with readiness. A man who's over you doesn't mention you, but a man who mentions you isn't necessarily ready to show up either. The difference lies in action, not words. At the end of the day, people can talk about you endlessly and still never have the courage to face you. But your worth isn't defined by who still speaks your name. It's defined by your ability to move forward even when they can't. Sometimes your silence speaks louder than their stories. Sometimes the best response to being remembered is to keep becoming someone worth remembering, not because you need their attention, but because you've learned that your peace is worth more than their uncertainty. You can always tell by the eyes. They betray what words try to hide. A man can keep his tone calm, his sentences short, and his walls carefully built, but his eyes will still give him away. When you look at him, really look, you can see the flicker of emotion that he tries so hard to suppress. It's there in the way his gaze lingers a second too long, in the way he looks away too quickly when things start to feel too real, in the way his eyes soften when your name comes up. The eyes are honest in ways the mouth refuses to be. They speak a language that the guarded heart can't fully silence. Even when his words are measured or distant, there's something in his expression that tells the truth. Because emotional avoidance isn't the same as emotional emptiness. It's not that he doesn't feel, it's that he feels too much. And because those emotions are so intense, he doesn't know what to do with them. He's like someone standing in front of a fire, drawn to its warmth, but afraid of getting burned. So he keeps his distance, even as his eyes betray his longing. Emotional avoidance is a form of self-protection. For many men, it's a learned response that goes back years, sometimes all the way to childhood. Somewhere along the line, he was taught, directly or indirectly, that emotions make you weak, that showing what you feel invites pain, that caring too deeply is dangerous. So he learned to survive by shutting down what he couldn't control. He built a fortress inside himself, and now, whenever he feels something powerful, like love, connection, or vulnerability, that old defense system activates. He goes silent not because he's cold, but because he's overwhelmed. When he looks at you, a storm happens inside him. Part of him wants to open up, to tell you everything he feels, to let his guard down. But another part, the part shaped by fear, pride, And pain tells him to hold back. That internal conflict shows in his eyes. You can see it, the push and pull between desire and fear, between wanting to be close and needing to feel safe. It's a quiet war he's fighting, and most of the time, he doesn't even realize he's doing it. People often mistake emotional avoidance for indifference, but that's not what it is. Indifference feels flat, avoidance feels heavy. It's a tension you can sense, like someone holding their breath. When he avoids talking about how he feels, it's not because he doesn't have feelings. It's because his emotions are as too largy, too raw, too confusing. They flood him. And since he doesn't know how to manage that flood, his instinct is to retreat. Silence becomes his shield. That's why he disappears when things get too real. Not because he stopped caring, but because caring so deeply scares him. Every time he starts to feel emotionally exposed, it triggers the part of him that remembers past pain, rejection, loss, betrayal, disappointment. His body interprets vulnerability as danger. So he shuts down communication, withdraws his energy, and acts like he's unaffected. But deep down, he's anything but unaffected. He's just trying to contain what he doesn't understand. If you pay attention, you'll notice how he lingers long after he's gone silent. He may stop calling, stop texting, stop showing up, but his presence doesn't disappear completely. You'll feel it in small, invisible ways. In the way he still watches your stories, in the way mutual friends mention that he asked about you, or in the way his name still seems to find its way into your orbit. His silence isn't the absence of emotion, it's the presence of emotion he can't process. He leaves physically, but emotionally he stays. He stays because what he felt was real, even if he couldn't handle it. This kind of lingering can be one of the most confusing experiences for the person on the other end. You sense that he still feels something, but his behavior doesn't match. He acts detached, but his energy says otherwise. It leaves you caught between two truths, the truth of what you see and the truth of what you feel. You know he cares, but he's acting like he doesn't. And that contradiction can drive you crazy if you don't understand what's really happening beneath the surface. The truth is that emotional avoidance is often rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of not being enough. When someone like this starts to develop deep feelings, they also start to anticipate deep pain. They associate love with loss, attachment with danger, and emotional openness with heartbreak. So they'd rather pull back before they get too close. But what they don't realize is that avoidance doesn't protect them, it just prolongs the pain. Because you can't run from feelings forever. They live in the body, in the memory, in the way his eyes still soften when he thinks of you. If you've ever seen that look, the one that says everything he won't, you know how haunting it can be. His words might say, "I'm fine," but his eyes will say, "I miss you." His tone might sound indifferent, but the way he watches you when he thinks you're not looking tells another story. You can't fake the kind of emotion that shows through someone's eyes. You can suppress it, you can hide it, but it's still there. Over time, people like this often find themselves stuck between wanting love and fearing it. They crave connection, but can't fully receive it. They want to be known, but dread being seen. They long for intimacy, but are terrified of what it will stir up inside them. That's why they hover, never fully in, never fully out. They may go silent, but emotionally they keep circling back because you represent something that touched them deeply, something that cracked open the armor they've spent years building. And yet, you can't save someone from their own fear. You can't love them into emotional safety. You can't teach them to open up if they haven't decided to face what's inside. All you can do is understand what their silence means, not as a reflection of your inadequacy, but as evidence of their struggle. Because when someone feels deeply and hides it, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the intensity of their own emotions. They're protecting themselves from feeling too much. But here's the hard truth. No matter how much emotion lingers behind his eyes, if he doesn't act on it, it remains just that, lingering. Emotion without expression can't grow into connection. He might feel everything, but unless he's willing to face it, you'll always be standing in the space between what's felt and what's said. So when you look into his eyes and see what he won't admit, don't doubt your intuition. You're not imagining it. That depth is real. But also recognize that seeing it doesn't mean you have to wait for it. You can acknowledge his emotion without carrying the burden of his fear. You can respect that he feels deeply while still choosing someone who isn't afraid to show it. Because the truth is, love isn't meant to hide behind silence or fear. It's meant to be shared, spoken, lived. His eyes may tell the story of everything he can't say, but your story deserves someone who can meet your gaze and not look away. Someone whose emotions aren't just seen but expressed, whose feelings aren't just felt but acted upon. Until then, let his silence remind you of this deep feeling without courage is still avoidance, and you deserve connection that doesn't have to hide behind the eyes. Your real power doesn't come from trying harder, chasing more, or proving how much you care. It comes from your ability to stay calm, grounded, and centered in who you are, even when someone else's behavior confuses you. That calmness isn't weakness. It's control. It's self-respect. It's the quiet confidence that says, I don't need to force what's meant for me. When you stop reacting to every pullback, every mixed signal, and every silence, you start to rise above the emotional chaos. You move from being emotionally dependent to being emotionally sovereign. That's when everything begins to shift, not just in him, but in you. Your energy speaks louder than your words ever could. People feel it. They can sense when your peace is intact, when your confidence is rooted, when your worth isn't negotiable. You don't have to announce it, prove it, or demand it. It simply radiates from you. And the truth is, the calmer and more grounded you are, the more magnetic you become. There's something irresistible about someone who doesn't chase validation, who doesn't crumble under uncertainty, who knows that their value doesn't depend on someone else's attention. When you stop chasing and start valuing yourself, the entire dynamic transforms. Suddenly, you're no longer trying to earn affection or decode someone's mixed signals. You start to see patterns more clearly. You start to pay attention not to what someone says, but to what they have done. Consistency becomes the new chemistry. Effort becomes the new attraction. Instead of waiting to be chosen, you start noticing whether someone is truly showing up for you, not with words or promises, but with presence and reliability. This shift doesn't just affect how others treat you, it changes how you see yourself. Because when you know your worth, you stop settling for emotional crumbs. You stop making excuses for inconsistency. You stop mistaking attention for connection. You start to recognize that someone's interest means nothing without effort. That affection without accountability is hollow. And that realization, that quiet moment when you stop overextending yourself for someone who can't meet you halfway, that's the birth of real strength. Staying calm and detached doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you build walls or pretend to be indifferent. It means you care without losing yourself. It means you can love someone deeply while still honoring your boundaries. It means you can be open without being desperate. This is emotional maturity, the ability to hold space for what you feel while refusing to abandon your self-respect in the process. You no longer chase closure, attention, or validation because you've realized that peace is more valuable than any temporary reassurance. And here's the paradox: when you stop chasing, people start noticing, especially those who once took your energy for granted. The very moment you pull your focus back to yourself, they feel the shift. Because energy doesn't lie. They can sense when your attention is no longer centered on them. They can feel when your emotional tether has loosened. Suddenly, the dynamic that once made them feel in control starts to change. They begin to wonder, what happened? Why isn't she chasing anymore? That curiosity, that uncertainty often awakens something in them that your effort never could. Your absence speaks louder than your effort ever did. When someone gets used to your constant presence, your texts, your availability, your attention, they start to take it for granted. They begin to believe that no matter how little they give, you'll always be there. But the moment you pull back, the silence becomes deafening. It forces them to confront what they lost. It makes them realize that your presence wasn't just something nice, it was something irreplaceable. Absence creates space, and in that space, truth is revealed. When you step back, people have two choices: either they step up or they let you go, and their reaction tells you everything you need to know. If they value you, they'll close the gap. If they don't, they'll fill it with excuses. Either way, you gain clarity, you stop wondering where you stand because their actions finally show you. That's the beauty of detachment. It filters out the uncertain and reveals the sincere. When you stay calm, you remove the emotional charge from the situation. You stop feeding the cycle of pursuit and withdrawal. You take your power back from someone who might not even realize they were holding it. And once you do that, everything about your energy changes. You become lighter, freer, and more at peace. You no longer operate from fear of losing someone, fear of being forgotten, fear of not being enough. Instead, you move from strength, from self-worth, from an inner knowing that you bring value just by being who you are. This kind of strength is unforgettable. People remember it because while most chase validation, you chose peace. While most panic when someone pulls away, you stayed steady. While most overcompensate to feel secure, you stood firm in your worth. That contrast leaves an impression. It lingers in the minds of those who once thought they could come and go from your life as they pleased. Because now they see the truth. You were never the one who needed them. They were the one who needed you. And that's when it hits them. Not when you tried to prove your worth. Not when you overgave. But when you stopped trying altogether. When your silence replaced your effort, when your absence became the mirror that reflected their choices back to them. That's when they realized the weight of what they lost, that your presence wasn't ordinary, that your energy can't be replicated, that your calm confidence was the rarest kind of beauty. So don't chase, don't explain, don't prove, just be. Be grounded, be centered, be still, because your peace is your power, your calm is your message, and your absence, when it comes from self-respect, not spite, will always speak louder than anything you could ever say. That's the moment he realizes you were never just another option. You were the one thing he couldn't replace.